Welcome to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. We are really glad you found us. In this podcast, me, Simon, a funeral director,
and me, Tina, I'm an independent celebrant.
we're going to discuss all things funeral in an informal space to demystify what happens when we say goodbye.
Based on your questions and queries, Si and myself are two industry professionals that are going to chat through the hows, whats and wherefores. We actively work in the funeral industry in Devon in the UK. So, we hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Welcome to Good Goodbyes. Hello, welcome to Good Goodbyes. And this is another guest episode with me, Tina, and my guest, Justine Coombs, who is an independent celebrant, award-winning celebrant. And she does many things in that life, but she is here today to talk about the loss of a friend. So, Justine, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's good. It's good to have Justine on because she's also a listener. So
I am a listener. I'm a regular listener. I'm up to date. I listen quite often in the car. That's my usual place for listening to your podcast, and it's usually when I'm on my way to the crematorium or on the way home from the crematorium if I've got a service on, and I listen, and I find it fascinating. I love it.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Justine. So it's lovely to have you here. And
thank you.
We're talking today about something that it's the kind of loss that often gets overlooked. And when we lose a friend, it might come with some rituals or recognition as losing a family member. It can feel different, but the pain can be just as steep. So how do we honour those friendships and how do we talk about them? That's kind of the flavour of what we're going to chat about today. So how did you come to be a celebrant, Justine?
Well, I've been a celebrant for more than 5 years now. But how I came into it is it's maybe resonates with a number of other celebrants in that I had, or actually with people in general, in that during lockdown, I was put on furlough from my office-based job, and I had an opportunity to rethink my life, not knowing how long the pandemic was going to go on for, how long we were going to be locked at home, and whether I would have a job at the end of it. And I thought, well, this is my one opportunity in life to think about what I would like to do. Would I like to take a different direction? What would I want to do? And I still to this day do not know what triggered the thought. And I know when I spoke to my family, they all looked at me aghast and said, what on earth are you talking about? But what had happened a number of years earlier, I had lost two significant people. I'd lost more than that, but there were two significant funerals for me. One was losing a very, very good friend of mine very, very suddenly. And this was 18 years ago, actually, this year. She was a couple of years older than me. We had met as adults, but she had been my boss. And then we had become friends from that. I became the witness at their wedding. So we got this really close friendship that was, an adult friendship, but it was a long and close relationship. And the day of her 46th birthday, which was in October, I texted her wishing her a happy birthday. She was working that day. She thanked me back. That was it. The next day, unbeknownst to me, I heard a day or so later to say that she'd had a catastrophic brain hemorrhage. She'd been prepping for work that day. She was a very, very bright lady, prepping for work. She was about to do a big presentation, and she'd obviously sat on the sofa and had this massive brain hemorrhage, and was found luckily by an electrician who was working in their house, who called the services, but sadly she died. They kept her alive for a while. She had wished to have her organs donated, but at the end of the day, she died a couple of days later. And I was absolutely devastated as a friend. It was, her family pulled together, and I was included very much. I got the phone call from her husband saying, in complete shock, saying, we've lost her. And I didn't actually still remember that conversation because I thought, what is he talking about? We've lost Michelle. Anyway, it transpired that she had died. And I was devastated. And that night, I just sat and, bearing in mind, 18 years ago, we were in the early days of internet and sort of online communication. I just thought, I need to speak to Michelle. So I emailed her and I sat late at night at a computer. It was one of those big computers back in those days, sat and just typed and poured my heart out. And I had 2 young kids at the time, so busy life. But this was at night and I just spoke to her and I emailed her. I did this very long email to her about happy memories and why she'd meant so much to me. And then when I'd finished sending the email, I sent it, went to bed and felt, I'd actually spoken to her in this weird way. It was just a way of communicating with her. And of course, it hadn't even occurred to me that her husband would be reading her emails. It just didn't occur to me. I was just messaging her. And he called me the next day and he said, Justine, your email was so beautiful. And it was, would you read that tribute at her ceremony? And I was like, as many people, I was, oh, I don't know whether I can read it. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do that. It's okay. Well, I'll be doing it for you, but also for Michelle. And so I agreed to it. And actually, he included myself and my husband. We went in the limo with the main party. We met at the house beforehand. So we were very much included as a member of the family. But I spoke at the ceremony. And there are aspects that I remember, but from 18 years ago, I remember speaking. I remember laying a flower on her coffin. I remember the feeling. I remember so many people being there. But it went well, and I spoke, and I did it. And then another funeral after that was my grandmother's funeral. And again, I did a tribute at my grandmother's funeral. And I think just by the fact that I'd done these 2 tributes, when I started thinking about my own career and what I'd like to do, I thought, do you know what? I think this could be my career. I think I could do this really well. And I was so blown away by it. My grandmother had a celebrant for her ceremony, and it was all about her. Although now when I look back at it, I realise it maybe wasn't, the eulogy was all about her. It actually wasn't quite as personal as I now make them, in my opinion. But it just led me onto that path of thinking I could be a celebrant. I could stand in public. I know I always had dreams when I was a child of going into the theatre or acting. And so this is a performance in a way, in that you are presenting. And I just love the stories about people and hearing about these fascinating lives. You go into someone's house, and when you leave, you have found out such extraordinary things about someone that you had no idea the story you were walking into when you first arrived. And that's what got me onto this path. So, I'm here because of Michelle and my grandmother, and that's why I do what I do now. And I'm sure that in some way that's what led me into this career path.
What an amazing story, and how lovely to meet Michelle through you, and to know that, in a strange and wondrous way, her legacy continues, because whenever you're doing a service, you're kind of taking that history with you. So
absolutely,
it's a wonderful thought. Celebrants see all kinds of relationships. What's the most surprising or touching story of friendship you've seen celebrated in a ceremony, Justine?
I have had friends that have rallied for their friend, and you realise what a strong relationship or friendship group that person has, and how devastated they are, but they pull together in ways in which they can contribute, whether it's 2 best friends standing together talking about their partner in crime, the third of the amigos, or, where they can actually just talk, and a bit like when I spoke from the heart, and it was literally raw speaking from the heart. Quite often you get that where it's, friends that will do a tribute, and there is space in the ceremony just to hear from the friend's point of view. how great a mum they have been, or from hearing and from experience, but to hear about the humor that's in a friendship group and the stories, and you see people's faces light up when they're talking about their friend. I think that is when you can really get that feeling of how important that friendship group was.
Yeah. And you hear wonderful stories from friends that are completely different from the family stories, because we all know each other in so many different myriad ways, as work colleague, as friend, as mum, and as you say. And we all have these different bits of ourselves, don't we? And I guess in a sad way, one of the few places they all come together potentially is when someone's talking about us, whether it's in a situation like this, where we're planning a celebration of life or a funeral. So yeah. And I did a couple of years ago come across a sad situation in which somebody hadn't found out about their friend's death until after the funeral. And the person had been they had a good friendship group, but they didn't live close to their friends, and they saw each other maybe 4 times a year, but they were still fantastic friends. And they messaged in between times, which I think is how a lot of friendships go, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And she hadn't heard for a while. She reached out and just happened to have the neighbour's contact number. And they said, "Oh gosh, did you not know she died some weeks ago? The funeral was very quick. The family just organised everything at speed." And she found it incredibly hard.
Yes.
And had all sorts of feelings about it. But her and a few other friends did a day of friendship remembering. So they went.
That is a beautiful way of doing it as well.
So that's how
having a picnic or just doing something that brings a group of friends together, where you can just have your friend as the focus, is another great way of having the time, because quite often time is not on our side when someone is popular, or someone, maybe you have a small ceremony slot or whatever it is. Quite often time is against the family in terms of what can we include here, what do we want to include. And so actually the wake is quite often a time afterwards of being able to speak more at length, but actually to do something that friend would have loved. And whether it's sitting on the beach, or whether it's going to the park, or whether it's going to the theatre and having a meal, whatever it is that sort of glued them all together to this friend, is suddenly a beautiful way of doing it, and gives time and just a chance to speak and listen.
And I mean, I'm a bit obsessed with the red arrows, Justine, in a kind of vaguely ridiculous way. And if they come over the building, I'll run out. I get really excited. I've seen them so many times at air displays. And so I kind of follow that hashtag, so to speak. And it came up, a couple of years ago, that a group of friends had, outside a crematorium, because there wasn't time and space inside, had kind of done a little bit of a red arrow display themselves. So they made cardboard wings, and they'd done can you imagine this group of about 6 people were doing a display? And
fantastic.
And it was so amusing, and also just obviously very relevant to the person who, a bit like me, was a bit obsessed with the red arrows. So there's so much possibility, isn't there?
Yeah, the possibilities are huge. And with friendship groups, they are the ones, the inspiration, they are the ones that will know, sort of the nights after a bottle of wine, and just those memories and stories that come out. And they're the ones that it's what makes you a multifaceted, or known as a multifaceted person, because people only see certain elements of anyone at any time, whether it's their professional side, their family side, and whilst you get glimpses as a family of what the friends meant, you don't know all the stories, you don't know, the real, and bringing something together like the red arrows is just a fantastic visual, humorous, memorable way of remembering, like
Why do you think the loss of a friend can hit some people so hard, even harder in times of family loss?
I think you choose your you choose your friends. I mean, your family is your blood, but quite often it's your friendship group that you have more in common with, or you have elements in common with that are really a special part of that story. And so I think that loss of a friend, I think when we come to arranging a funeral, we're talking to next of kin, which 9 times out of 10 will be a family member. Obviously, if there aren't family or they're estranged from family, then friendship groups become their family, their network. But those that are lucky enough to have a good family as well, but also good friends, the family will, of course, take the lead, and the family, no doubt, will take into account close friends in many ways. But there are those friendship groups where it's just such a special relationship because of the things they have in common, because of the history they have from school, the hours they spend together. Quite often you spend more time with your friends and colleagues than you do with family, waking time anyway. So it's I think it is a very special relationship, and it's one that's maybe sadly slightly overlooked because of time constraints when you're organizing a celebration. And of course, not all celebrations of life have to be in a crematorium or sort of in a confined time. You can choose to have a celebration of life absolutely anywhere, as long as you can have the space, and so then that does give you more of a chance to incorporate more into it, or make it even more personal with us, like a little dance of red arrows in the middle of the set. The moment. You could incorporate all of that because it is something that's just very much them. But yeah, I do think a friendship relationship is, and it can be an incredibly important relationship. It depends on the individual, obviously, but
yes, and I think it is interesting, this idea of these are people we choose. And friendships are incredibly important. You see lots on social media about people who struggle to make friendships and how they feel the loss of not having friendships in their lives. And I always describe friendships as like being in a lift. Like, some friends get in on the first floor, you go into the penthouse, they're there for the whole ride. Some friends, they get in at the 14th floor, which is maybe when you had your children, you meet them in that way, and they get out at the 18th floor, and they're just in a transient way in your life, but they're still good friends. And other people get in at different times based on all sorts of different things you might be up to. And therefore some friendships are fluid, but they're a big feature in people's lives. And what you were just saying as well made me think about, the LGBTQ plus community and their chosen family.
Yes.
And the fact that often, if you're having a celebration of life or a funeral and you're part of that community, if you're not the next of kin, there can be a little friction between what you want, chosen family wise, and what the relations want. And I did once, I did
how to represent that person.
And I did once do a service for somebody who we had to split it. So we had something in one place which was more traditional with all of the relatives and some of the friends, but the chosen family had something completely different on a different occasion because it just was easier to do it like that.
So and there's no conflict then. There's no some people do live split lives. Some people can't marry up all elements of their lives for whatever reason, and so by having that, whether it's a ceremony, whether it's less formal, as I said, like a picnic on the beach for the friends to come together, or going to a club and celebrating that way, or having a formal ceremony. There are many different ways that friends can do something that represents the friend they knew, rather than the friend, the friend, or the daughter or son that the parents maybe wanted to remember, and that's maybe a different set of views. So I do think there's ways in which it can be, and it's important as part of the grief process. I mean, I'm no grief counselor or expert, but I'm obviously surrounded by grief as a large part of my life now, and just being able to express your love for someone and your memories, and that is all part of the grieving process, and I think it is very important. So if there isn't a space in the actual ceremony, have an alternative ceremony. There may well be space in that ceremony for that friendship and that love that comes through the friendship, but there is no reason why you can't take that and do your own thing. And I have done ceremonies like that, where one in particular was where it was two sides of the family. You get family conflict, and families estranged from each other, and whoever is the next of kin may not necessarily have had the same relationship as other members of the family to that person, and they may have kept those two lives separate. So by having there was an official ceremony at a crematorium, but for her children, that this was a ceremony that was a step parent was involved. A step parent took the lead on being next of kin. The children did not agree with the way it was done, what was said, how it was, everything about it. It jarred on them. And so they then had a celebration and we did this on the beach. They painted pebbles. In fact, I had something on my social media recently about it, actually, because they painted pebbles, and we just did a relaxed beach, because she was far more, it was all about having her grandchildren around her and her walking friends around her. And some of them walked to get there. And we just did a very informal, they did employ me as the celebrant, but it was outside. And it was just very different from the ceremony that the spouse had chosen to have on the day of the actual cremation. So yes, it can be, as breakdowns within family as well.
Yes, exactly. And I think for our listeners, often funerals are arranged by next of kin, and there's a very specific way that's commissioned through a funeral director, for example. Yeah. And if the next of kin commissions someone like Justine or I as a celebrant, then we're working for them as our client. But if you're listening to this and thinking, but that didn't work out for us, and we would have liked something as friends, you can also approach celebrants to do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
For you, which is as the example that Justine has given, really. I'm starting to think about how lonely people can be without their friends, and actually that grieving piece. It's really important, we say this all the time in this podcast, to have a ceremonial or actual space or point of closure or something which takes you from thinking about them as a living person in your life to a person who you still care about and love, but who has died.
Yeah.
And that transition helps you. But if for any reason you didn't get to participate in that, and maybe even if you actually did, when you want to share something with somebody who's been a friend for 30 odd years of your life or more, and you go to pick that phone up and they're not there, it feels really significant.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so I think the idea of bringing some kindness to yourself if you've lost a friend is really important. Have you had sort of thoughts about that yourself, Justine?
In terms of
supporting people who've lost friends and how they might grieve, what things might help them as they grieve their loss?
Helping with grief. For me, I know that there's 2 days which are a day apart, which is Michelle's birthday and the day she died were consecutive days. And so I always know when that's approaching. I always like to recognise in some way, whether it's through my private Facebook page, or this year I put something on my Celebrant page, because it felt important just to honour her and remember her. And I know that it helped me. I put it onto just by typing it out and thinking about what I wanted to say, I was bringing her to the fore. But I know that her husband also said that he loves it when he hears her name being mentioned publicly, because he knows she isn't forgotten. And, we all move on with our lives. 18 years is a long time. She was 46 when she died. She turned 46 the day before she died. And so for me, it's just recognizing that week in that year in some way that I'm doing something, whether it's just messaging her husband or whether it's putting something on social media or something just that's personal to me. It helps me in that way just speak her name and keep her alive in that way. But there are all sorts of other ways in which you can have, sort of those memories, those ways of dealing with your grief, and whether it's just doing something that you loved together, and it is quite a lonely way of doing it, but I think if you can bring other people into that and just have her almost sitting on your shoulder and saying, right, this is for Michelle, we're going out for that afternoon tea this week, just because we know that she loved that and she loved her cup of tea and her cake, so let's do that, and I think if you can incorporate that with maybe other members of the family or other friends, or members of your own family who remember Michelle. And it just is a way of, I keep in contact with all her family who, I'm in Kent, but her family are all in the northeast of England. We have a really good relationship, and it's we try and see each other once a year at least, just to try and keep that and just talk about Michelle. But it's, so there's different ways. Everyone's got their own way, whether it's you were motorbike fanatics and you can go down to Brands Hatch for a meet, or take a ride out somewhere, whatever it is. I think you can do things with that person, that friend in mind, and knowing that they would have loved that, and you're putting a smile on your face because you know how much they would have loved doing that as well, through tears as well, if you're feeling particularly emotional at that time. But grief, it does get easier. It does just change, and I think it took a long time for me to not be able to cry when I talked about her, but it's now, I'm at that stage where I can talk about her and laugh and smile, and Michelle would have loved that. Do things that would be pertinent and mean something, and just keeping their names alive, their memories alive is what's, I think, important to us as individuals as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I've heard of some lovely things. And some of them, like you say, are so simple. I've heard of somebody who realised that they hadn't really got many photographs of them actually physically in a frame, and they were all on their phones. So they went through the process of kind of pulling some photographs together and choosing some nice ones and having them somewhere in the house where they were like, oh, I see her from time to time.
Michelle's on my dressing table. It's her wedding day, and it's her and myself, her in her wedding dress and myself. And she sits on my dressing table. So every morning when I'm doing my hair and my makeup, she is sitting there.
That's lovely.
So that's just she's not anywhere else in the house, but I know that she's there, and she's
So like you say, things like that. I've heard, the simple act of lighting candles at certain times, just to think that you remember them. I knew someone else who used to go they used to go for a certain dog walk and always stop at a certain place, and they'd have a coffee and a pastry, and she always buys 2 coffees, she said, and it's just bonkers really. But if I see someone who looks like they need a coffee, I'll give them my friend's coffee. But she said it's just a thing that I do, and not all the time, but when I go in that direction. So there's lots of ways, and there isn't probably a right or a wrong way, as we always say to the listeners. Do what feels right for you, do what feels personal, and what's right for you, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to feel heavy or formal. We're talking about now, Justine, is those informal ways of remembering somebody.
Yes, absolutely. And it is sometimes just in the little things. It's just in the little moments that that you sit back and think, okay, that's my friend, or or that's a saying, or whatever. It's just in those little moments, and just acknowledging that you're remembering them.
I mean, and sayings and things like that are really good, aren't they? I used to work with somebody who sadly we lost a work colleague, which is another No, dear friendship. And there was two things about this person. One was they had their own plate that they used to bring cake in on us, and they said you couldn't have cake if you didn't have it on a nice plate. And they were the big baker and brigger in of cakes, you know. And if Colin had done a cake, someone would be going like, "Oh, there's Colin's cake in the kitchen." You know, people would shimmy over and go. And so, you know, we kept his cake plate with the permission of his family after his sudden death. And that was nice, because if there was ever cakes, they were on. And you see people sort of shuffling about in the kitchen going, "Where's Colin's cake plate?" You know, trying to locate it. So that was nice. And he always used to say fairly constantly, "You'll live to regret it." All sorts of things. So, you know, we used to sort of tagline that when we'd be in meetings and things that happen. And it was a moment when he probably would have said that. We'd go, as Colin would have said.
Yes,
we'll live to regret it.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's all sorts of ways. If people are listening to this and they have got somebody else in their life who has lost a friend, how can we support them? What would you advise? Because you can't always see the depth of that grief, really.
No, you can't. And no one can know the depth of anyone else's grief. Just because you're not the son, the daughter, the mother, the father, doesn't mean you don't have the same level of grief. And in fact, you know, the support is there for the immediate family. That's where they are being able to talk to the funeral directors. They are being able to be supported in that way. They are being led through the process. The friends are more peripheral often to the whole thing. So there are charities out there, and they should be, you know, there's a number of charities that will support you. There's free charities. Grief Chat is one that our association is, and it's one where it's just an online typing, and you can get, there is someone at the other end, but you can just sit and type and just, I don't know, you can type whatever you want. There is someone there to listen to you. But there are all sorts of other charities out there that just have advice, and depending on, you know, it's the sudden deaths that I think pull the rug out of a lot of people's lives, especially if it's death by suicide. And sadly, we see in our industry, we see far too many death by suicides of young men, all people, but particularly young men does seem to be the biggest group. And, you know, that leaves a friendship group that is absolutely devastated. You know, it's why didn't we talk more? Why didn't, you know, how could this have got to this stage? And you see those, and there is support out there for you know, death by suicide or death by whatever it is. You will probably be able to find a charity out there that will support you.
Yeah, we just
support and talk to friends as well.
In as we're recording this in early November, we've got an episode going out which is from the organisation which is Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide, SOBS. So I'll put a link to that in to the show notes to that episode and to that charity, and also I'll put a link into Grief Chat. And as you quite rightly say, you know, sometimes when it's young friendships with young people, it's often the first loss they've ever experienced.
Absolutely.
And secondly, they're experiencing it as a young collective as well as the family members in the background, obviously. And I officiated a funeral for a young person, and when we were chatting outside the chapel before we all went in, and a couple of the young people were doing something at this service, they were lighting a candle. So I just went up to reassure them what would happen and so on. And they were saying, like, I said, "Oh, you're going on to the wake afterwards?" And they were like, no, that's not the place for us. And I said, "Oh, are you doing anything?" And they said, "Oh, well, I don't know really." And I knew, because I'd met the family and I'd written her service, that actually she was a bit obsessed with McDonald's. So I said, "You should go to McDonald's." Like, she would have loved that.
Yeah.
And they were like, "We should do that."
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I hope that that's what they did afterwards. I didn't check in with them, but, you know, at least we talked about it and thought it was in their minds. So, Yeah.
From
It's
my
hard.
point of view, there is nothing more difficult. I mean, obviously you've got babies ceremonies and children's ceremonies, but a young person that's died of cancer or died of suicide or died, however they've road accidents, which takes, a number of young people, that to watch as the person standing at the front and leading the ceremony, and to see the devastation in so many young people's eyes who are just not knowing how to process it. It's it's tragic, in so many ways, but the ripple effect is more of a tsunami effect, really, on friendship groups in those situations where it is young lives that have gone for whatever reason. That is a proper tsunami effect, and so that is where you try as a celebrant to make sure that the words are right for them as well as the family who are going through such awful grief. But the ripple effect is massive going out into friendship groups when someone's young, because they are surrounded by so many friends, whether it's school or college or university, their sports teams, they have such large friendship groups at that stage, and the effect can be massive. So yeah, getting support within, and a lot of the communities will find a way, whether it's the school or whatever, will find a way of supporting them. But it's them having their own time to grieve and to understand and to process is very important too, and be involved in the ceremony if that's something that they feel they'd like to do, or have their own, as you said, a McDonald's gathering, or meeting up as they do on a Friday and actually doing it, but talking about that person whilst they're there as well is in some way, whether it's wearing a jacket, passing out, an item of clothing is sometimes, rather than taking them down to the charity shop, it's sometimes, the family want to hold on to certain things. But opening it out to friends, no matter what age, I've got an amazing jacket here. She loved this jacket. Would you like it? Is something that could be really special to a friend. Something that means something tangible that they can just keep and hold on to. So yeah.
Yeah. What great advice. I mean, we're coming close to the end of our episode. I'm just thinking of hints and tips. Hints and tips for celebrants would be, I'm sure many do this already, but if you haven't already got a question that you use when you're with families, is how do you want to include friends? Is there anything special that
Yes, absolutely.
you want to include and involve friends?
And sometimes it's even at the meeting stage, and they'll say, look, her best friend, can we involve the best friend? Yeah, if the best friend's available for the meeting that we've arranged and you feel it's appropriate, then absolutely, let's include her in it, because we'll get a different aspect. Or I'll talk to them offline and get their tribute and just find out a little bit more to get that side of things. So yes, getting friends involved can really help the friends through as well.
And support the family, because I've heard more than once families say, at the wake we found all these things out about them that we didn't know.
Yes.
So
or a piece of music, even just one piece of music that the friends have chosen because they were the ones that all went to those concerts together or whatever. Choosing that element and the story that goes behind that song is something that can be really.
And asking friends for contributions, sometimes if you have the visual tributes, asking friends to send some photographs
Photos. Absolutely.
For families who are listening, just they can really help you. The friends can really help you pull together that very individualized feeling that you want for your service.
And the friends can also choose a piece of poetry or write a tribute, even if it's the celebrant that's reading it out for them. They don't have to do it, but a tribute from them would, no matter how long it is, just a couple of lines will bring that friendship, through to that final ceremony.
And something I did once when time was short, but the family wanted to include friends, is I said to them, could they just all give me a word or two or three words, just three words that's like they thought of when they thought of this person.
Do you know what I did at one ceremony? It was going to be a natural burial, and it was a young mum, and the husband was giving me all these words to describe her from the friends, and it was just a tsunami of words. It was so many words, and I thought, well, I can't use all these I would just be reading out words for the sake of it. So what I did, because it was a natural ceremony, it was a burial, I took a couple of branches of leaves from a big plant in my garden. I took them all individually, and with a silver pen, I wrote all these words down. We put them in a basket, and then the friends chose the descriptive word that meant something to them. And when it was their time, they threw it, they scattered it on top of the coffin. And it was just their way of choosing. And I said, we've got so many words to describe her personality. And we were able to use all those descriptive words, and just every friend and family member took a word that meant something to them on a leaf and just left it with her as something that meant something to them. So that was quite a nice way of doing it when you get a lot of ways of describing a person.
I love that example. And something that I've done is created a word cloud. So,
Yes.
I don't know if anyone's ever done this that's listening, but if you use lots of words and you put them into a cloud, the words that might appear more frequently will seem bigger in this cloud of words. And so what came up for this person was, fun, was it, when it was one of the biggest words. So that was a nice thing to do. But yeah, lots of options. So yes, I say for families,
so many options.
Options.
Writing words on little cards that you could put on a tree, hang from a tree, or there's all sorts of ways in which you can, or a memory book even, just writing those stories down.
And that's when a celebrant will come in very handy, because we're a pretty creative bunch, and we will help you find a way if in that moment of grief and loss, when you're organising, your head isn't on straight and you're not really thinking about it in that way. So I'm just going to ask a final question, Justine. I'm going to ask you, if someone listening has lost a friend and doesn't know how to mark it, what's one small meaningful thing that they could do today?
They could light a candle tonight. We're on these long evenings. You could have a candle that you just light for an hour every time you feel you want to sit and remember them. You could light that. It could be scented. It could be a favourite scent of theirs, or it could be, something like that, where you can just focus on them. Just give them some time. And we've got, as I say, long evenings now, so that's maybe a nice way of doing something. Or taking that walk that they used to do, or just, writing, even just writing. You can have a little book and you just write something down in there every so often when you want to think about them. There's all sorts of ways in which you can honour your friends. Going through photos of, if you've got a smartphone, you can actually put their name in, and a lot of photos will come up with her or his face, where you've had all those years of friendship. There are just ways in which you can just do small things that aren't extravagant or whatever, but just give some focus in on that person and give them the time that you want to give them. Make your time from your own busy schedules to actually just sit and be with them.
Wow, what a perfect thing to have said, Justine. It's been an absolute pleasure having you today, talking about friendship and the loss of friends and being a celebrant. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome.
This has been Good Goobyes, and you've been listening to Tina
and Justine.
Perfect. Thank you.
You've been listening to Good Goobyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment and share. Drop any questions on our social media, on Instagram, or in the text option in the show notes.
Si and I are qualified professionals, but we always advise our clients to seek any additional support from medical practitioners if they need to. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay well and be kind to one another.